Welcome, Fadi. I'd like to begin with the following questions. When Monaliza Smiled is a romantic comedy, why did you choose romantic comedy to tell this story? Do you like working within the genre conventions? Why or why not?
I do, in fact. I like genres. I like the fact that, for example, like in romantic comedies, they've been made for, I don't know, like 100 years now, and they always follow the same formula. But people like to watch them because there's always something new in the setup of the story, in the combination of characters. There's something fun about them, and the main reason behind choosing a genre, and this genre in specific, was that I wanted to make a film for for the theater, like for normal audience, not for festivals, for example, because most of the films that were made that had been made before that in Jordan were mainly festival movies. Um, this one, I was keen on making a film for the Jordanian audience and possibly the Arab audience as well, something that they can watch in theaters and then, on TVs, like family audience. This was the main rationale. And yes, I chose this topic, or like this story came up, which is a story that is mainly like it has like, let's say, a problematic aspect. Like it's not too controversial, but it's a little bit, as a Jordanian society, it's not something that we've seen. And then because I wanted to comment on certain societal aspects of Jordan, so I felt like if I put it in the genre of comedy, it will be lighter and more accepted, and less kind of problematic in that sense.
You also wrote the script for the film. So where did the idea for this script come from?
Wow, that's I know, like, that's a typical question, like you have to ask any filmmaker, but then I can remember, like bits and pieces of where the idea came from. Um, but I can never like remember, quite exactly where the idea came from, but it was a combination of ideas. I think the main concept or thought that kind of triggered the film in my mind was that in Jordan we have a big Egyptian community, and it's mainly male laborers. So they work in basically everything, in construction, in cleaning, and cooking, like restaurant services. So they're everywhere. They're part of the everyday life. And I thought to myself, like, this is uh, like an integral part of Amman and Jordanian everyday life. And it must have happened. Like, I haven't heard a story like this before, but I know that it must have happened. Later on, I realized that, yeah, there are a lot of mixed couples in Jordan, with Egyptian men and Jordanian women. Um, um, and I thought, like, why don't we see, this story on screen? This is knowing the society, I knew that this is somehow, like a forbidden love, story, because of many things, like, for example, like Jordanian women until today cannot give citizenship to her husband or to her kids from non-Jordanian husband. So it's not something that, it's frowned upon because of that, in general. And also because of the like the class system that, this kind of situation creates. So in general, like, these are expats, immigrant workers. So it's not always, people are not generally happy, about that kind of relationships. So that triggered me, like that made me think about it. And again, this is why I put it in the romantic comedy genre, because I didn't want it to be like too heavy. I wanted to kind of, um, like talk about these things, but without, making a film that is too serious. So that was the main concept. But then the idea of having a woman named Mona Lisa was also another idea, and then I combined them together. It was um, something about how someone's name, especially in a certain community where the name could be unfamiliar, can really change their life. And we know that, like, in some like areas in Jordan, like, if you have uh like an unfamiliar name, it will be something that people talk about, and a lot of people would pronounce differently, and it will become something, like, fun, to from storytelling aspect, maybe not from the like point of view of the person who holds that name. So then I came up with this story about, like, how would a woman who is named Mona Lisa. And then the irony here is that, the stereotype of Jordanians is that we are very serious. Like, we don't smile, we don't laugh that much. Again, it's a stereotype, like, you can see me now, I'm smiling the whole time. So, but that's like the stereotype. This is something that comes from, the culture, and from sayings, and proverbs. So I was like, okay, if there's a woman who has, like, a situation in life, she was named under like after the icon of smiling in art, but she has a life, and she's part of a society that doesn't smile, or doesn't encourage smiling, let's say. And then she got in a relationship with an Egyptian man. Egyptians, on the other hand, as a pop culture, they're known for being jolly, and they have, like, like a great sense of humor. So what if we combine these two characters together in a romantic comedy in Amman, in Jordan, and it all started from there.
And the lead actors create very memorable characters. So, how did you approach working with the lead actors? Was there a kind of collaborative process? Was there improvisation involved in the process?
Um, I allowed a bit of improvisation. I write the script, and I enjoy writing the dialogues. So I usually, when I write dialogues, I like, write them and rewrite them until I feel that I'm satisfied with it. But then when I casted them, I also had readings with the actors, and I allowed them to kind of tweak the dialogue so that they're comfortable with it. It wasn't that much of improvised with the Jordanian characters as much as it was with the Egyptian, because at the end of the day, I'm not Egyptian, and I was writing an Egyptian character. So I allowed him, or like, I workshopped the dialogue with him, and I had suggestions, and I asked him, like, is it better like this, or is it better than that? In general, he was happy with the dialogue, and he felt it was all natural. But then, yes, I do allow some sort of workshopping with the actors. I like the actors to understand their characters, to understand their backstory, and the circumstances, and then kind of participate in creating the character with me.
I want to ask also about supporting characters. So two of the supporting characters, one of them, Haifa Al-Agha and Nadir Amran, they gave very memorable performances. So how did you work with them?
Yes, these like Haifa and Nadira are two, like, veteran actors. Like, they're actors that we grew up watching on Jordanian television. Also, Nadira Umran has, like, a more of a pan-Arab fame, because she acted in Syrian and in Egyptian cinema and television. So it was kind of a, like, an ambition at that point. I want these actors to be in the film. Also, again, because I wanted the film to be for the Jordanian audience, I wanted these points of references, like, for them, seeing these people that they know on screen will kind of give a credibility to this project, to this film. It was like, I remember, for example, like, when I approached Nadir Umran, and it was very, I was like, that was like more than 10 years ago, so I was like much younger, and I was a bit, like I was afraid. Like I didn't know like whether she would see me like this kid who's making a film. She worked with like, you know, huge, directors like Yusri Nasrallah from Egypt and other directors. So they arranged the meeting, and she had read the script by then, and she was great. Like Nadira, for example, like she's very, very professional, and she understands the relationship between the director and the actor. And it was like so smooth from the beginning. Also, Haifa, she's a different kind of actor. Like she's very passionate and spontaneous, and that shows in the character. I think like a lot of what she had in the character on screen was kind of brought from her, like own character and her own attitude. So it's such a pleasure to work with both of them.
I also want to ask about the location of the film. So international films like Lawrence of Arabia, kind of classic film in the United States, another American film, Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, those have been shot in the more remote areas of Jordan, Wadi Rum in particular. Your film, When Mona Lisa Smiled, is shot in the capital city of Amman. So what were the advantages and disadvantages, maybe the challenges or the benefits of shooting in the capital city?
Uh, uh, I like this question. I have been on sets on productions that happened in the desert as well. But I guess like you don't want me to talk about like the logistic aspect of that as much as like the choice maybe. Or I will talk about both. We'll
Oh,
see.
yeah.
But first of all, I think the fact that I'm from Amman, I'm from Jordan, I'm telling this a story that I want to tell to the local audience. I think that's the difference. If I were, or maybe like those other films that you're referring to, some of them are like Hollywood production, and some of them are, films that maybe are Arab or Jordanian, but they are more of like festival movies. Um, I think that's a difference between if I want to tell a story, I wouldn't go to the postcard location, if that makes sense. Like I don't want to because I think it's something that we can't avoid. Like if I'm making a film and I know that the West is going to be the audience, I might think that I want something that the West can relate to, or that the West can would want to see on screen, like Wadi Ram, for example. And here I guess like I must say, like there's this um danger maybe of like kind of doing like self-orientalism, if that makes sense. But in my case, it wasn't that. Like I was just trying to tell a story, like a Jordanian story for the Jordanian audience. And I'm from Amman, and it kind of always bothered me, that there's a lot of story in the city in Jordan, as opposed to the like to the countryside. And also in Jordanian drama, it was always also set in Bedouin culture, um, for commercial reasons as well, because the Jordanian drama was always promoted in the Gulf, and they wanted that kind of Bedouin soap opera genre. So a lot of people at that point, because there wasn't a lot of cultural production like TV and media coming from Jordan. So a lot of people, even in the Arab world, they've always associated Jordan with that, like with the countryside or the desert. And to me, I knew like this is not Jordan. Like, yes, this is the postcard Jordan. Like this is what is promoted, in the region and of course to the West. But to me, like, like we live in cities, we have urban problems, that we need to talk about. And this is where the choice came from. It wasn't, I have to say that it wasn't that, that went in my mind. Now I'm like kind of, talking about this retroactively. But yeah, like to me, at that moment, I just wanted to tell a story. This is the story that came to mind, and it was set in Amman, in the city. But now when I listen to this question, this is what comes to mind.
What is the climate in Jordan for local or regional filmmakers? And maybe if you could tell us a little bit about what impact the Royal Film Commission has on film production in Jordan?
It's it's still an industry at grassroots. Like we can't say that we have like an industry as big as what it is, for example, in Egypt, which has been going for over 100 years now. Um, and not even comparable to other like smaller markets in the region. Jordan, we produce maybe like 2 3 films a year, but generally the films are excellent in terms of like storytelling value and production value, and they always, as again, because a lot of them are festival materials, so they go and they do great in around in class A festivals around the world. So that's the situation in general. There's a lot of great filmmakers and storytellers now. In the last, let's say, 5 years, maybe or so, um, television production also is booming. So we see a lot of like Netflix productions and other platforms are also producing series that are set in Jordan. So there's that like industry that's kind of starting to bubble, if you may say. The Royal Film Commission has done a great work in that aspect. First of all, it had and it has, it still have uh, been attracting productions from around the world to shoot in Jordan. These productions create a lot of like work for people to do and for filmmakers to get trained in professional sets. I myself had worked on one or two of them, and they create a lot of job opportunities and training, as I said. And also, on the other hand, they have funds for Jordanian films. The film was like my film, Monaliza Smiled, was actually funded by one of the funds by the Royal Film Commission. So yeah, like, and I think if you ask me what's the most important thing they're doing aside from what I just said, is that they are also contributing to creating film culture, because that's not something that we have in Jordan. Let's be realistic. And now, and since I don't know, like 20 years when they got established, they've been doing a lot of screenings around the world, around the country. I mean, around Jordan, not only in Amman, because the problem that we have cinemas in Amman and maybe in a couple of other like big cities in the north and the south, but other towns and cities, like, they don't have any theaters, and that is a problem because then they don't get to see any films aside from what they see on TV. So they do a lot of film caravans, and they go around and they show films, a different type of films than the ones that people might be able to see on television. And I think this has created the perception towards film in Jordan, which is very important for creating a film culture. Can I ask,
Could you
is my sound breaking or something? Because sometimes it feels like the internet is slow. Okay.
um, can you tell us maybe some of your favorite Jordanian or Arabic films? This film festival screened Captain Abu Raed in 2018 as part of the festival. And of course, Deeb circulated pretty widely in the United States. So those might be familiar to some of the people watching the film today. But what are your
Yes.
favorites?
It's a tough question, but I'll answer from Jordan, because I think that's easier, because like they're fewer in number. The first two films that come to mind. One is a recent one called Daughters of Abdurrahman, Banat Abdurrahman. And I don't know, I really enjoyed that film. I felt like it has the same vibe, that I try to reflect in my film, which is like the local neighborhood and women's stories and how they reflect, like bigger issues in the society, but it also has this, light-hearted tone. So I really enjoyed it, and I think it's like a very important film. It even tackled like more serious, I would say, put serious between quotations, but more serious issues than what I had presented in When Monaliza Smiled. It is, slightly more daring, and it talked about a lot of, very important stories that need to be told from Jordan. And I think the writer and director did, great job, Zaid Abu Hamdan. The other film is by Mahmoud Massad, who is originally a documentarist, but he made this film a few years back. It's called, in Arabic, it's called Inshallah Stafadet. In English, the international title is Blessed Benefits. And I think both films, at least Blessed Benefits is on Netflix now in the region. I don't know if you have the same collection in the States, but I do encourage people to watch these two films.
Great. And you also teach writing and filmmaking at the American University in Dubai. So does that give you time? Does that allow you to have time to write and direct as well?
I mean, I try. I teach, and I've been trying to keep in touch with the industry. The thing is that I don't only do like to be honest, I don't promote myself as a director because I like to do other things also related to storytelling. And I see myself more in that area. Like I'm a scholar, so I do research about television screenwriting in the Arab world, which is an area that is understudied. And I also do work with writers. So I work as a script doctor or screenplay consultant. And, aside from teaching, it's tough because teaching takes a lot of time, and we have a big teaching load here. But I think that's like a universal problem in academia, and I do have time. It's not easy, but I think I've been managing to keep this balance, between teaching and also doing research and also working in the industry, in screenplay development.
Just to follow up on your scholarship, what are you working on with regard to maybe Arabic television these days?
I've been writing and publishing about the screenplay production processes in the Arab world. It all started with my PhD in the University of Antwerp, which studies the development, like the reimagination of the Arab pan-Arab identity through transnational Arabic television drama. I study the aspect, like two aspects. One is that the scripts themselves, like what we see on screen from the aspect of screenwriting or narrative, and how it because a lot of series nowadays present characters from different Arab nationalities, and sometimes they're written by by writers and producers from different Arab nationalities. So I study the representation in these series, but I also study the process of taking decisions, creative decisions, and in screenwriting, and how or what aspects affect or influence these kind of decisions. Now there's, for example, like there's one recent article that I'm starting to work on now is about remakes formats, which is something that is also becoming a trend now. They get series from, let's say, Nordic noir, or from Turkey, or from Korea, and they culturally adapt them to the Arab world, and they reshoot them, they reproduce the show. So that's also something that's interesting because there's this globalized, flow of storytelling that's going around the world. And a lot of that work, when you see it, it has a lot of like it has a local element, but it also has a globalized element. This kind of interplay between these two things and how these screenplays and decisions are taken is something that fascinates me, and I like to kind of keep an eye on it, because I think it's important both for academia and also for the industry to understand that.
From this film, from the film that people are going to screen today, what do you hope they can appreciate or learn about Arab culture from it?
I'm sorry, your sound was breaking. I didn't hear the question.
So from the film your film, when Monaliza Smiled, that people are going to watch here in the US, what do you hope that they can learn or appreciate about Arab culture after watching the film?
To be honest, like I want them to enjoy the film. I don't like films to be lectures. I don't think like we should burden, filmmakers and storytellers to kind of, teach people things. Obviously, if you will watch anything from any part of the world, you will learn something about that part of the world. I would like them to know that, this kind of story, which is universal in its essence, right? Like this kind of forbidden love, we can see it in you know in the States, between like people from different races, for example, or another country in the world. And I think it's interesting for people in for the audience here to kind of notice the similarities and differences, because I think it's interesting to see how there are these problems that kind of cross borders around the world. And there's also like the cultural specificity, which makes life in different parts of the world also different. So I think I'd like them to understand and appreciate that, and maybe if it makes them curious to know more about other areas in the world.
And from the film, I think people may also get a sense of family issues in Jordan, maybe the culture of family. Could you talk a little bit about the culture of family in Jordan and maybe in the film as well?
I'm sorry, the sound went off again. Can you repeat the question?
Is it mine or is it mine?
It's yours, but I don't know if
No.
it's from my internet or from
okay.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So I was asking about the issue of the culture of family in Jordan. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the culture of family in Jordan as you tried to represent it in the film.
Yeah, I don't. Now that you asked the question, I'm thinking like I didn't present any like full traditional family in the film. Like I don't think we've seen any like father and mother and the child together, because none of these families that I showed are complete in that sense, if complete is a word that we can use here. But like family in Jordan and there's again, between brackets, values, like family values in Jordan are quite conservative. And I think this is where these issues that we highlight in the film come from, because there's always like this question of what's right and what's wrong, and there seems to be like this catalog for things and how things should be. So I think what I wanted to say in the film, if I am allowed to say that there was any message about family, because to be honest, I didn't think about it. Again, I was just writing a story and trying to tell a story, and all these things were in the backdrop of the story. But I think what the film has in regards to family is that like people are allowed to love and make choices with people regardless of their background. And this happened throughout history, and it will keep happening. And I remember like in one of the screenings in Jordan, one of the audience members in the Q&A took the microphone and started talking about, yes, this is a very important film because it highlights the idea that Jordanian women until now they don't give nationalities, so that seems like they have like a second class citizenship. I like that. I like that the film kind of opened this debate and kind of helped maybe in one way or another to highlight problems regarding how family is perceived, and not only by people but also by law, which is a shame.
So the family, of course, is kind of implicated with the neighbors, or the neighbors are sort of implicated with the family. Can you talk about the neighbors in the film, their role in the film?
Yeah, that's a nice point to raise. It's true. I think in Jordan, and then I need to say that I also that now like as a scholar, like I don't like when we use like a blanket term and we say that Jordan is like this, or the West or the East or Arabs, or but then again the film kind of plays on the stereotype, and it shows like a side of Jordan that is quite conservative. And that's something that you find in these kind of communities where like family is not just like the nuclear family inside the house. It's also extended. In some situations there are like the extended family, but also the neighbors in Jordan. And this is what I reflected in the film, that neighbors are part of the family, more or less. Maybe they don't call themselves family, but they're part of the decision. Like they have to also approve like who you bring to your home, and like if you're dressed properly, and if like they, but also like to be fair, which is something that I also show in the film, is that they are happy when you're happy, and there's this sense of community that is sometimes like heartwarming, and sometimes it becomes um like a support system for some people. There's a lot of things, when you look at them, they have like two sides. They're on the one hand, they're good in their essence, like people care about each other. But of course, this care sometimes becomes suffocating when someone wants to, kind of be different or take an unconventional path.
I think that leads well into my next question, which is about the societal pressures that young couples can face. I guess particularly when dealing with a couple where each person is from a different country, right? How can a relationship manage the societal pressures?
It depends. It depends. Of course, again, Jordan is a very diverse place, and people also think differently in different places, and different societies. But I think, and to be fair, like I haven't lived in Jordan for the past 10, 11 years. So maybe things have been changing, but like in general, people care. Like I know from the experience of my friends, for example, like they do care about whether this person that I'm about to marry, like are they accepted by my family, are they accepted by my extended family. So there's that, of course, and I think that's something that I tackle in the film. um I'm sure that a lot of that decision, or like ability to take independent decisions in regard to that, relies on uh, classes. So like generally you might find that like some classes are more like the more like educated. Sometimes it means also that the more liberalized they are, although that's not a like a rule. But and also of course education, like the more people are educated, or women are educated, the more they're financially independent, the more they're allowed to kind of like take decisions and say, yes, I want to marry this man. And of course it's not always problematic. Like there are people who marry, like people from other countries or other nationalities, and it's not a problem. But what I tried to highlight in the film, that in certain contexts, it is problematic, and unfortunately, this is why I keep bringing up the class, because I think a lot of the problems come from like a like an implied class system that people assume with certain differences.
Now that we have the difficulties and the challenges aside, rom-com, of course, romantic comedies are ultimately about some kind of happiness. So can you maybe talk a little bit about how you saw happiness for women and for men in the film?
I guess in that case, if we look at the ending, I intended to have like this bittersweet feel at the end of the film, because I wanted a happy ending, because any romantic comedy needs to have a happy ending. And at the end, we find that the protagonist and her lover are together, which is a happy ending. So they made that choice, despite everything, to be together. But I also, and this is not something that we say in the film, but I used to say it, in screenings and in Q&As like this, is that this is not going to be completely happy. And I think, in my mind, Mona Lisa and Hamdi, they knew that. Like, they knew that there will be problems. Like, they are from a class that will not be able to afford private education. Because if you have the money, like in the situation like this, it wouldn't matter. You don't need like a governmental health insurance. You can have your own. You don't need to send your children to public schools. You don't, it's fine if they don't have the nationality of the country they live in, because you can afford to do things. But in their case, it will be a problem, and I think this is a problem with most, people who reside like in Jordan, but they are not from Jordanian fathers, only Jordanian mothers. So what I wanted to say at the end is that in regards to their relationship, to the central relationship of Hamdi and Moniza, it is a happy ending, but it's also in the context of everything else. And we see all the other characters. Some of them are happy, some of them are broken because of, like this story that triggered, changes in their lives. And I wanted that kind of ending that says that she smiled because she was able to love. What happens after the film, is, something that, we can speculate about. But, happiness in the film, or in the ending of the film, was like a little bit of a realistic happiness, like this is a happy moment, that we are happy for the relationship, but also, given the circumstances of the story, we have to understand that happiness also comes, in the context of things that might not be completely happy. But that's fine, because that's life, I think.
So the final question is, now that you're talking about the end of the film, it sort of resolves itself in a particular location. I don't mean to give too much away here, but it resolves itself in a bus station. Is there some kind of symbolism you saw in the bus station?
I wouldn't say like symbolism. I wouldn't put that much weight on it. It's again a genre convention. Like I felt like at that point, Hamdi was about to leave to go back home, because there was nothing that tied him to this place anymore, and she had to follow him. And generally, and a lot of romantic, not all of them, but like, a lot of romantic comedies, the like the protagonist would follow the love interest, to the airport or to the port, or to somewhere, before they leave, or before they take a decision that will kind of separate them forever. And yeah, this is why I chose the bus station, also because I think like there were, like realistically, there were two ways for an Egyptian to leave Jordan. One is the airport, which is easier, but then the bus is, like, to me it felt like more, it showed that he, like, it's more of a struggle. Like, if you're gonna go by bus, then you have to go all the way to the south of Jordan to Aqaba, where you take a boat, and then you take a boat from that city to Egypt, and then he probably needs to take another mean of transportation to go to his village. So it also shows that, you know, this is like it's going to be a difficult trip for him, but he was taking this decision because he was heartbroken at that point.
Thank you very much for answering all of these questions. I want to
you.
give you an opportunity to maybe, if you have some final comments you want to share.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm very happy. You know, the film was made in 2012. So it's like over 10 years ago. And whenever you know, there's an opportunity like this, when I'm asked to have the film screened, I'm happy, you know, to kind of reconnect with the audience and to see how people react to it.
Thank you again. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.